So you clicked on this video for one of these reasons. You're new to FF14, you have yet to begin FF14, or you just enjoy watching my videos. And with the Xbox release on the horizon, or already released, what better time to release such a video? In this video, I've compiled some important pointers for getting started and beyond. So without further delay, let's just get into it, shall we? Before you buy the game outright, I highly recommend trying out the free trial, which includes the entirety of A Realm Reborn, Heavensward, and the Stormblood expansions, allowing you to level all the way up to level 70 and having access to an additional 5 new jobs. Getting up to the story of the Heavensward expansion will allow you to play Dark Knight, Astrologian, and Machinist, which all start at level 30. Samurai and Red Mage are also available upon reaching level 50, with no other prerequisites, and both of these also start at level 50. So there is a fair amount of content for you to do before you even need to purchase the game. That said, the free trial is very limited in some aspects. So if this does bother you, purchasing the game isn't a bad idea, just make sure you actually enjoy it. Something I'd like to add is the story does start off really slow and doesn't really get interesting until Heavensward, in my opinion. Jobs also feel very slow at the start, but once you reach level 60 plus, things do start to pick up a bit. All I'm saying is give the game a fair chance. If you're a patient gamer and don't need 24 hours of Subway Surfers, I'm sure you'll have a great time. Upon launching the game, you'll be greeted to the game's main menu. Here you can pick data centers. These are server clusters separated into regions, NA, EU, JP, and OC. Pick the most appropriate one for your region, but I recommend making a character on a preferred world, unless you have friends on another server. Preferred worlds offer a leveling boost up to level 80 for 90 days on all combat jobs. After picking a data center, you'll have to pick a starting race. These have very minor attribute bonuses, which I wouldn't even consider when picking a race. Just pick what aesthetically appeals to you the most. In case you're wondering, female Viera and male Hrufka are unlocked by owning the Shadowbringers expansion, while male Viera are unlocked with Endwalker. And if you're wondering why you can't play a female Hrufka, well, they're coming with the Dawn Trail expansion, so soon. Female Aurora is the only correct choice here, by the way. From there, you can change how your character looks, choose a deity, which is just a flavor thing for your character, and all of these options can be changed via the usage of a Fantasia. You'll get a free Fantasia for completing the base game of A Realm Reborn. After that, these can be obtained from the cash shop, known as the XIV online store. After customizing your character, you'll be given the option between a few starting classes, which later evolve into jobs. Marauder into Warrior, Pugilist into Monk, and Conjurer into White Mage, just to list a few. Classes are mostly a legacy feature, with only the starting jobs having classes to evolve into. Later jobs do not have these prerequisite classes. Gladiator and Marauder are tanks, Pugilist and Lancer are melee, Archer is a physical range, and Thaumaturge and Arcanist are casters. Arcanist can also evolve into a healer later on. 14 uses the Holy Trinity system, which is an MMO term for a game that divides its classes or jobs into 3 categories: tank, healer, and DPS, or DD. Tanks keep enemies' attention and mitigate damage, healers make sure everyone is alive and healthy, and DPS do damage. Due to 14's nature, every party member does have a responsibility to output damage though. Pick the class that appeals to you the most, but don't stress this decision too much. You can change your class early into the game upon reaching level 10, and I encourage dabbling in them and trying different classes and roles. You could discover that you prefer playing a tank over a DPS or vice versa. Additionally, there's the armory bonus, which gives an EXP boost to any jobs that are lower than your highest level job, which further reinforces the idea to experiment and try other things. There's even dedicated crafting and gathering classes. If you played other MMOs before, then you're probably familiar with crafting and gathering being a profession rather than an actual class. But in 14, these are dedicated classes with their own mechanics, abilities, and even gear. You can play every job on one character in 14, so don't feel pressured into thinking you made a mistake by picking a job you don't like. It's also worth noting that jobs do not have specs like in other MMORPGs. So for example, a paladin is always going to be a tank, and a dragoon is always going to be a DPS. But to make up for this, 14 does have a wide variety of jobs available. 19 at the current time of this video, but there will be 21 by the time Dawn Trail releases with the addition of Viper and Pigmentor. In comparison to other MMORPGs, I think that's much more, with more being added every single expansion. Although you can change classes early on, expansion jobs require you to own the expansion they are associated with and complete the prerequisites. These prerequisites are usually just being the same level as the job's starting level. However, for Heavensward jobs, you are required to reach said expansion in the story. Once you've selected a class, you'll choose a name for your character and a server to pick, go through a separate sequence of cutscenes, and begin in a starting city depending on the class you've chosen: Gridania, Alder, or Limsa. These are the 3 major cities within the game. It's important to log out in these types of zones as they provide rested EXP, which is an EXP buff with a cap. You'll get this buff as long as you are within a sanctuary, that is any major city or settlement. Rested EXP is this faded out portion of your EXP bar. This is how you can tell how much rested EXP you have. You'll also have a little moon icon when you're currently within an area that is giving you rested EXP. Let's move on to the different types of quests, starting with the most important, the main scenario quest, otherwise known as the MSQ. MSQ will progress you in the story and unlock most of the essential content that this game has to offer: dungeons, trials, gear, etc. We'll go over that later, but just for now, it's important to progress this. Something to note with the MSQ is it can and will level barrier you. This means you'll have to level up via other means. You'll know this when the MSQ icon becomes red. This indicates you do not meet the quest requirements, which is usually just too low level. For this reason, we have side quests, which will gain you a marginal amount of EXP, but the highlight here is the blue quests. These are important, if not equally important to the MSQ, as they will unlock content and features which will help you on your journey. I recommend doing them whenever they pop up during your questing, and keep on top of them so you don't have to go back and do them later. Additionally, they net you a good amount of EXP, and they'll keep you from being gated by the MSQ. Although level gating won't happen too often, and probably won't even be an issue until you reach the current expansion, it's still worth doing blue quests for the unlocks. Another important quest type are job and role quests. These will net you not only good EXP if done when relevant, but also essential skills to your job's toolkit, making job quests a must-do. More ways to level are included in the leveling section of the video. To stay on top of all this, make sure to check your journal, which contains all of your quest information and gives you the ability to track and untrack quests. This helps keep things organized if you accepted too many quests but don't want to abandon them, so you can just come back later to them without having to re-accept them. If you ever lose which MSQ quest you're on, the UI element main scenario guide will set you on the right path. Let's begin this chapter by breaking down the roles a bit more in depth, so you know what your selected role responsibility is, starting with the DPS, or damage dealers. DPS actually have 3 different sub-roles within the role, which varies their playstyle and utility. This includes melee, caster, or magical range, and physical range. Melee specialize in, well, melee. They have to consistently be in close range to deal damage with limited range options. Also included in their kit are positionals. Positionals are attacks that must be executed from the target's rear or flank, indicated by the enemy's hitbox. Successfully hitting your positional will net you more damage, so it's kind of essential to get good at doing this. To make up for all this, melees deal the highest damage of all 3 roles, and even have tools to increase their party's damage or mitigate the damage enemies do. The currently available melee DPS include Monk, Dragoon, Ninja, Samurai, and Reaper, with the addition of Viper once Dawn Trail drops. Casters are your magical range DPS. They make use of the MP resource and for the most part have cast bars, although in Endwalker the only one to cast most of the time is Black Mage, while Red Mage casts every other spell, and summoners only need to cast 3 to 4 times per minute at max level. Casters deal moderate damage and offer good utility options like party damage and resurrections, with the exception of Black Mage. They can also mitigate the damage enemies deal, just like with melee. The roster of casters includes Black Mage, Summoner, Red Mage, and Pictomancer with the Dawn Trail launch. Physical range specialize in ranged combat, dealing the least damage of the 3, but offering plenty of party support options to make up for it, including damage mitigation and damaging increasing buffs. The exception here is Machinist, which is more of a selfish DPS but deals damage almost equal to that of a melee, while also having the range advantage. Physical range include Bard, Machinist, and Dancer, a whopping 3 jobs. Thanks Square Enix. Let's move on to tanks. Now, like mentioned previously, tanks keep enemies' attention and mitigate damage, but let's break that down a bit. First, let's go over some terms 14 uses, the term enmity. If you've played any other MMORPG, you're probably familiar with the term hate or aggro. Enmity is essentially that, and if you haven't played any other MMO before, those terms simply mean the amount of attention you have generated on enemies. But don't stress this too much, the game makes it easy to generate enmity due to tank stances, a tool that all tanks gain access to at level 10, and ensures the tank generates the most enmity amongst every party member. You can tell how much enmity you have generated via the party list. If this bar is full, red, and has an A by it, then you have full enmity on the enemy you are targeting. If it's partially full, yellow, and has a 2, you have second highest enmity, which is important to know when off-tanking, as it's best for the off-tank to be second in enmity, for backup, main tanking, or for certain mechanics. Finally, if the bar is blue and has a number from 3 to 8, this indicates a low amount of enmity generated, which should be normal for every single other party member. This only shows on your targeted enemy low, which isn't very helpful for tanking multiple enemies. This is where the enmity list comes in, which shows all enemies you are currently engaged in combat with. This works just like the party list enmity. Red icons mean max enmity, yellow yellow means second, and green means below the second highest in enmity within your party. Additionally, tanks have defensive tools to help mitigate damage. Make sure to spread these out between mob packs so you always have a few running per pack. When starting off with tanking, don't be afraid to pull small, but the more comfortable you get, I really do recommend pulling more, and I highly encourage it. And the only way to improve how well you are at using defensive cooldowns is to limit test. So pull as much as you can. For tanks, we have the following choices: Paladin, Warrior, Dark Knight, and Gunbreaker. Healers are the ones keeping the party alive and healthy. Healers make the use of the MP resource, and their kit involves healing spells, shields, mitigation, debuff cleansing, buffs, resurrections, and of course offensive spells to deal damage. If you pick a healer, your number one priority is to keep everyone alive. Even if someone takes unavoidable damage, it's still your responsibility to keep them alive to the best of your ability. But that doesn't mean everyone needs to be 100% health at all times. This is something you'll get better at over time, but as a healer, you want to dish out as much damage as possible while also making sure nobody in your party dies. Improving this ability is something that will happen over time, but things to watch out for is when an enemy does an unavoidable raid-wide damaging attack, causing everyone to take damage, and looking out for spikes of damage on your tank, capitalizing on the use of defensives and using your own abilities to heal to create room to deal damage. For example, the boss just did a raid-wide, and now they probably won't do another one for a while, so you're free to do some damage, or the tank has some defensives running, and they are barely taking any damage, just to list some examples. Additionally, healers have a plethora of tools to heal with, without compromising their damage output, and by learning how to fully utilize them, you'll be able to push out more damage over time. The list of healers consists of White Mage, Scholar, Astrologian, and Sage. White Mage and Astro are regen healers, and Scholar and Sage are barrier healers. And this is a perfect chance to now talk about the combat of the game. 14 is a tab targeting MMO, which, unlike an action MMO, you don't need to aim your abilities. Simply click or tab to an enemy and press your buttons to attack. These buttons being your GCDs and OGCDs, and is the core of 14's gameplay. The GCD, otherwise known as the global cooldown, shares a cooldown with all your weapon skills or spells, and should be rolling at all times, while your OGCD, otherwise known as the off-global cooldown, are your cooldowns on separate timers. These can be situational abilities like buffs to enhance your mitigation or healing output, or abilities to be used off cooldown like buffs that increase your outgoing damage and party's damage. Another important thing to note is the difference between single targeting and AoEing, meaning area of effect. In single target situations, you'll be using single target attacks, and in AoE situations, you'll be using your AoE attacks. Make sure to distinguish these situations to speed up encounters. As a basic rule of thumb, a majority of jobs do benefit from AoEing 3+ targets. However, there are some exceptions when AoEing 2 or more enemies is more beneficial than single targeting. So make sure to read those tooltips and math it up. Some jobs in 14 have proc-based abilities. This is when a condition is met to proc an ability, making it accessible for the player. Not all jobs have procs, but it's important to note when a job does to capitalize on it. An example is Bard, which plays songs, and the songs have a % chance to proc the Bard's abilities. This varies from reduction in cooldown to entirely new abilities only available with proc. Another example would be Black Mage, which can force procs with its sharp cast ability, allowing it more damage and movement throughout an encounter. Unlike procs, every job in 14 has a job gauge. Some jobs unlock this early on, some later on. The idea is the same though. Job gauges are a resource which are unique to every job. Some function similar to one another, while others function completely differently. Job gauges overall are a fairly simple and intuitive resource. Some require you to build the resource up through the usage of actions, some generate over time, and some proc, just like with Bard's procs. The more you play a job, the more you'll familiarize yourself with the different types of job gauges, so don't stress this too much. It'll all come to you in time. And of course we have LBs, otherwise known as limit breaks. This is shared between party members and holds up to 3 levels, level 1, 2, and 3, with level 3 only being usable in a full party. This is a party of 8. This charges over time, but can also be increased through critical healing, which is healing critical health, or shielding lethal damage, which would have otherwise killed you. And executing certain mechanics correctly will also grant LB. Each role has a different limit break. Tank LB reduces incoming damage by a % for each level. Healer LB heals by a certain % for each level, with Healer LB 3 resurrecting all dead party members with no resurrection sickness and restoring their health and MP to full. Alright, when you die and you get resurrected by a job that has Resurrect, all healers, Summoner, and Red Mage, it'll leave you with a res sickness debuff. The first time will reduce all your stats except vitality by 25%, and if you die again and get resed again before the timer even expires, you'll get a second res sickness, which further reduces those stats by another 25%, totaling of 50% reduction of your stats, which is pretty bad. Melee LB is a single target attack varying in damage with level. Caster LB is a circle AoE attack varying in damage and radius with level, and physical ranged LB is a line AoE attack varying in damage and also radius again. All of these have various animation locks, so be aware aware of that before using them, as they can leave you in a dangerous spot if used at a bad time. In the early game, the most important LBs are the DPS ones, as they will speed up a dungeon run, be it LBing a dungeon pack as a ranged, or LBing a boss as a melee. Tank and healer LBs do see use slow in high-end content and can be used to clutch badge situations, with some encounters even having forced tank LBs or healer LBs. While on the topic of combat, I'm going to quickly fire off some points that you should be aware of. First of all, read your tooltip of your actions and trait pages. Both tabs have very important information, and it's good to get a grasp of them. Read these as you level up, but don't leave it too late and overwhelm yourself. Learn as you go. Don't be afraid to watch a guide on your chosen job, because there are plenty of helpful resources out there. Sprint. This increases your move speed for 20 seconds outside of combat and 10 seconds inside of combat on a 60-second cooldown. It's good to use this between dungeon pulls so you get the full 20 seconds, and this can also be handy in some encounters when you need that extra movement speed. So don't brush this off your hotbar, it's very handy. Resurrection immunity. When someone dies and gets resurrected, they'll have 5 seconds of invulnerability, which works on most damage types with a few exceptions going through the immunity. If any actions are used, the effect will wear off, which is fine in most cases as you don't always need the full 5 seconds. Just be wary about incoming damage. A big misconception I see is thinking you can't move during this invulnerability window, which is false. You can move and jump as much as you want without losing the buff. You just can't use any actions which involve GCDs and OGCDs, or using items, or interacting with anything. Before we move on any further, let's briefly go over some common mechanics you'll see throughout your new player experience. The first thing you'll probably notice are the red or orange and hue AoE effects. These are avoidable AoEs that, well, should be avoided, as they can deal damage or even put debuffs on you. Additionally, not all AoEs are marked in such a way. Some will have unique patterns to them, but they usually look visually bad, as in, you wouldn't want to step in that kind of bad. You'll learn this over time, as there are too many for me to realistically cover. Second, we have gaze casts, which can be avoided by turning our character around. Just like with avoidable AoEs, this functions similar and will deal damage or debuff the player caught looking at the gaze. Doom mechanics. I feel I should add this to the list, as you'll see these quite often, at least early on. There are 3 ways to cleanse dooms depending on the type of doom it is. Experimentation is key here. The 3 different types are the cleansable dooms, which must be cleansed with Asuna being a healer crossrow action. You'll know if it can be cleansed with Asuna if it has this white line through it. This indicates a cleansable debuff. Max HP dooms, which can be cleansed by being full HP, and removable dooms by doing a mechanic correctly. For example, stepping on a glowing pad to cleanse the doom. Lastly, we have interruptible casts, which can be, you guessed it, interrupted. Tanks and physical range are the 2 roles that have access to interrupts, and if you see these casts and you're one of these roles, make sure to hit that interrupt. If not, these will negatively impact the raid in some way or another. We then have pyretics, which will deal damage to you if you do any actions or move during the duration, so make sure to stay still or risk taking some really bad damage. Freezes, basically the polar opposite of pyretic. Do actions and move a bunch to avoid being frozen in place. Ins outs, pretty self-explanatory, but some mechanics will either force you into an enemy's hitbox or outside of it to avoid damage. Now, of course, there are a lot of mechanics early on, but these are mostly intuitive and you'll learn them all over time. Oh, right, and stack markers. If it wasn't obvious enough, these include to stack up, because I have to mention this because I've seen so many people not stack up for these. Something I can highly recommend doing as a new player is the Hall of Novice, which is unlocked upon reaching your first level 15 class or job, and can be accessed at the Adventurer Guild in any city by speaking to the Smith. This will take you through a series of duties which will train you up with the basics and give you a role-appropriate gear as a reward. You will even get a ring at the end that increases EXP earned until level 30, which is pretty neat. Speaking of those rewards, let's talk about the inventory and the armory chest. The inventory holds up to 140 slots holding all of your miscellaneous items. Included is a tab for key items, for quests, and a crystal tab, which is a gathered resource used for crafting. The armory chest holds weapons, left side and right side gear, left side being your armor pieces and right side being your accessories. Make sure you have equipped role appropriate pieces in each slot. You can even set a gear set by pressing this button, which will save the gear set and job. Another nifty button is the recommended gear button, which will automatically equip you with the best possible gear for your job from your armory chest. For even more inventory storing options, we have retainers. Retainers are unlocked at level 17 in the story. You can customize retainers, choose a class or job for them, including gathering classes, and send them on ventures, which is a way for them to bring back materials, minions, and dyes. Most importantly, retainers can store items, crystals, and even sell items on the market board for you. To hire a retainer, speak to the retainer vocate in any major city. This will take you through the steps purpose of making a retainer. You can access your retainer via a retainer bell, which are scattered throughout major cities and settlements. Additionally, you can also change your retainer's appearance at any time as long as you have a retainer Fantasia, which can be bought from the market board or randomly obtained from Retainer Ventures. You can have 2 retainers for free, but can rent out more on the Mog Station, which is 14's cash shop. I've been playing this game for almost 10 years, and I've never needed more than 2. That said, I'm not a crafter or gatherer main, but I just feel this is unnecessary in my opinion. Oh right, and you can also set jobs and classes to them, as I said, but you have to have that class or job unlocked, and it can only reach up to the level that you are currently on that class. So if you're level 50 warrior, then your retainer can only go up to level 50 warrior. It cannot surpass you. So just keep that in mind. While we're on the topic, the market board is 14's version of an auction house, which I'm sure you're aware of if you've played MMORPGs before. Simply go up to the market board and you'll be given a plethora of such functions. You can buy all sorts from the market board, like glamours, gear, mounts, minions, crafting materials, consumables, dyes, and it just goes on. You can buy a lot from this. If you're familiar with MMOs or RPGs in general, you probably noticed that this game also has gear durability, which decreases whenever you defeat enemies or die. If your gear drops to 0% condition, it'll lose its value completely and be deemed useless until repaired. So it's a good idea to stay on top of your gear durability and repair it whenever you can. There are multiple ways to repair your gear, the first being visit any major city or settlement and finding the Mender NPC, who will repair your gear for a small fee. The other method is having your crafters leveled so you can repair your own gear with dark matter, which can be brought from the junk monger, an NPC also found in any major city or settlement. The last method is to request a repair from another player if they have their crafters appropriately leveled and they have the dark matter required to repair the gear, and you could also tip this player for their services. You can only request a gear repair, by the way, from people within your party, so you have to invite them to a party if you wanted to get them to repair your gear. Before I forget, let's briefly touch up on materia. If you know a gem system from other MMOs, I know I mention other MMOs a lot, but it is what it is. It's similar to those, but a lot simpler. Materia can be slotted into your gear via a materia melder, again located in any major city or settlement, or done yourself. You just need one crafter level to meld materia or request it from another player. This player doesn't need to be in your party, like with repairs, by the way. Materia enhances secondary stats by a fixed amount, and how much materia you can put into gear varies from piece to piece. For example, blue gear can only have 2 materia slots melded into them, while green gear can fit 2 guaranteed, but 5 in total if you were to overmeld, with the overmelds being at the mercy of RNG. It's best not to overcomplicate yourself with the materia system early on, as it doesn't really matter until you're at endgame, but it doesn't hurt dabbling in the system early on to get a feel for it. Materia melding can be unlocked upon reaching level 19 and visiting Central Foundland and completing a short side quest, Waking the Spirit. Let's actually talk about gearing low and how to acquire it. There are multiple ways. Vendors sell basic gear for gil, although this should be avoided in my opinion, as it's quite a bit of gil for the quality of gear they're offering. A good alternative to this is the market board, which is basically the player trading board, as we mentioned, and you can search for all types of things here, but we're going to focus on gear here. We can filter out the options we don't need and specifically search for gear in our level range and for our job. This gear can sometimes be expensive, but other times you can find good deals, so make sure to occasionally check this when leveling. That said, if it's your first job and you're going through the MSQ, this will reward you with gear pieces anyway, so you don't really need to stress the alternatives too much unless you plan on changing jobs halfway through. Additionally, when entering dungeons, if you're lucky, you could net yourself some good pieces of gear. If you go in with a party and a piece of loot drops, you'll be presented with a few options: need, greed, and pass. You can need on a piece of gear your job can use, and it will always beat out a greed roll. You can always greed roll regardless of if your job can use it or not, and pressing pass does exactly what it says. Pass is the piece of loot. Finally, every capstone level, that being 50, 60, 70, 80, and 90, you'll unlock time vendors who you can find in every major city next to the main aetheryte. Also, not to cause, oh my god, my voice sounds very different right now because it's a different day and I'm recording this at a different time. But to add a bit more context to what I just said, it's each major city of that capstone level. So for example, you're on Stormblood expansion, you're level 70, then you'd have to go to Kugane to get 70 gear. You can also go to the hub of that expansion, which for Stormblood would be Rauga's Reach. If you were to play in Shadowbringers, the main city would be the Crystarium, which you could also get this gear from for level 80, or you could go to Yulmore, which is the hub, and get the 80 gear from there. Hopefully that makes a bit more sense. Tomes can be acquired through various duties at these capstone levels and can be used to purchase gear for the given levels. This gear lasts you a good few levels and is hard to replace, so a good early investment overall, and can be stored later for other jobs within that role. This gear won't be purchasable until you complete the base story of any given expansion. For example, if you reach level 70 but haven't completed the Stormblood base game AOSQ, you will not be able to purchase this gear from these vendors. You'll have to first finish that. Don't be afraid to spend these tomes of Poetics, as they are simply for the capstone levels, and for endgame a different tome currency is used. Before moving on, let's go over the gear rarities: white, green, blue, and purple, and item level. In 14, arguably the most important thing is item level, which we call eye level, as the higher the item level, the more overall stats we have. So keep this in mind when comparing gear in rarities. White is standard gear which can be obtained from vendors and crafted by other players. The advantage here is because white gear can also be crafted, it can be made HQ, or high quality. HQ gear pieces have overall better stats and are more desirable over NQ, or normal quality of the same item. White gear is mostly used when leveling and doesn't see use in endgame content. White gear is tradable, by the way. Green gear consists of dungeon gear and crafted gear. Because green gear can be crafted, that means it can also be high quality. Green gear from dungeons is mostly used for leveling, while crafted green gear can be great as an entry level set or catch-up gear for endgame content. Green dungeon gear is mostly non-tradable, with few exceptions, while green crafted gear is fully tradable. Blue gear is obtained from raids and trials and serves as some of the higher item level pieces. This varies from catch-up gear to best in slot gear. Blue gear cannot be traded. Purple gear is relic weapons obtained from the relic quest chain. Every expansion has relics, these are mostly cosmetics, but do become best in slot at the end of an expansion. Purple gear also clearly can't be traded. Oh, and if you wear this piece of gear, like a green piece of gear, and you go into combat, then you will spirit bond it, and then it can no longer be traded. The advantage to this is once you fully spirit bond something to 100%, you can then extract a materia piece from it, and it could be a really good materia piece, or it could be a really bad one. Either way, it's pretty good to extract your materia, because it's pretty much for free. Okay, let's begin with the map and the minimap. The minimap is a good tool to track down quest locations quickly and orientate your direction in encounters. The main map can be good for checking multiple quest locations and figuring out pathing to certain locations. Early into the game, you'll interact with an aetheryte. These must be attuned to and can be used to teleport to and from all around the world for a small gil fee. Or you can get a single location as your home point, unlocking return, which is a free teleport to your home location on a 15-minute cooldown. This will also be the point where you resurrect when you die and there's no one to res you, so you just release and you'll go back to your home point. You can also register up to 4 favored locations, with an additional 1 favored location if you use a security token, which I highly recommend. Favored locations will reduce the cost of the teleport, saving you gil, so make sure to set these up when you can and don't stress which locations you pick, as you can always change these later at any other aetheryte you want to favor. We also have the aethernet system, which is used in all major cities and hubs. Besides the main aetherytes are small aetherytes, and these are used to quickly travel through these areas. You'll have to attune to these just like you would attune to the big aetherytes, and as much as it is a drag to do, I highly recommend attuning to all of these upon reaching a new city for the first time, as it will save you a lot of time in the future. Next, let's talk about mounts and how to get them. Upon reaching level 20 and reaching a certain point in the MSQ, you'll be given a choice to pick a Grand Company. These are basically 14's equivalent of a faction, but they don't affect much other than a few cosmetic items, and you can always change this later, so don't stress this choice too much. Just pick a Grand Company that appeals to you the most. Grand Companies have their own ranking system and can be used to trade in gear for a currency, which can be used to spend on all sorts of goodies. But these are mostly cosmetics and crafting resources. It's also a great source of daily EXP for crafters and gatherers by turning in specific items, if that is something that interests you. After picking a Grand Company, the affiliated Grand Company's HQ will have a quest to unlock your first Chocobo. Then collect 200 Grand Company seals, which can be acquired from Fates, Specific Duty, Roulettes, and Grand Company talents. Once you have the seals, you can buy your very own Chocobo and start using it as a mount. You also unlock the mount guide. This will show you a collection of mounts you can collect throughout your journey. Mounts can be acquired through various means, like from quests, achievements, encounters, and more. There are also ways to increase your mount movement speed and unlock flying. To increase mount's movement speed, you'll have to participate in hunts. Hunts can be unlocked at level 50 and beyond at your Grand Company's HQ and expansion cities. Hunts range from special powerful mobs to standard open world mobs. You can accept daily hunt marks to hunt standard mobs and a weekly B rank. These will grant EXP, gil, and hunt currency, which can be used to purchase various rewards, including increased mount speed in given areas. Hunts also include A and S ranks. A ranks can be tackled with a party, and S ranks are typically typically like road bosses, usually requiring multiple parties to take down, except in old expansion zones where they're probably going to be pretty easy to take down if you're max level. In my opinion, increasing mount speed is kind of redundant when you could just fly once you hit level 50 and complete the base game of A Realm Reborn. However, flying in expansion areas is unlocked via Aether Currents, which you can collect through exploring and doing blue quests in a given area you're trying to unlock flying in. To help with finding Aether Currents, you'll be given an Aether Compass at a point in the Heavensward MSQ, which will be added to your collection tab. Using this will give you a prompt and direct you towards the nearest Aether Current with some rough coordinates. Once you collect all Aether Currents from the area through exploring and doing quests, you'll unlock flying in that zone. I recommend unlocking flying whenever you discover a new zone, as it's highly convenient when returning to these zones and will save you a lot of time in the long run. Also, the quest will net you a decent amount of experience and help you avoid being MSQ level walled if that's something of concern. While on the topic of mounts, we also have the minion guide, not as important, but minions are 14's version of non-combat pets. They can accompany you in the open world and are mostly cosmetic. Same as mounts, these can be acquired through quests, achievements, encounters, and more. Before we move on, let's go back to our Chocobo. Upon reaching level 30, we can access a new quest at Camp Tranquil in the South Shroud. This will unlock the ability to use our Chocobo as a companion if we summon it with a natural green, which can be bought by vendors in any major city or settlement. Initially, a companion can be summoned for 30 minutes, but if you use another natural green, you can extend it by another 30 minutes up to a maximum of 1 hour. Companions can only be summoned in the open world, but it's worth having out when you intend on doing open world content to help you out and level them up. They also don't take a party slot, so they can be taken into parties without worries. Additionally, this quest will also unlock the Chocobo Saddlebag, which is an extra inventory storage accessible as long as you aren't duty bound, which is incredibly helpful, so I definitely recommend doing this. Next, let's move on to ways to level up and some duty content. Starting off with the hunting log, not to be confused with the hunts. The hunting log is a great source of EXP for the first 1 to 50 levels, and I recommend keeping on top of it during those early levels to avoid being level walled. While out in the open world, you'll notice these events with purple icons. These are called fates, basically 14's version of open world events. These happen frequently, net a decent amount of EXP and Grand Company seals, and can be worth doing while waiting for a duty queue to pop. Additionally, there's the shared fate system accessible in Shadowbringers and Endwalker zones. This is a progression system which unlocks special vendors who will sell various materials for these gemstones, a currency awarded for completing fates in these 2 expansion zones. There's also leave quests, but these are pretty bad for leveling combat jobs. That said, they are a fantastic way to level crafters and gatherers if that's something you're interested in doing. Lastly, for open world content, we have Beast Tribe quests, which can be unlocked upon reaching level 41 and progressing the A Realm Reborn MSQ. There are multiple different Beast Tribes unlocked, and the first few can be unlocked at your Grand Company's HQ. Individual Beast Tribe quests can be done 3 times a day, except the Realm Reborn ones, which can be done 6 times a day, and a further 3 more times if you rank up within their reputation on the same day. Every day you'll have a total of 12 Beast Tribe quest allowance, which means you can only do 12 a day. Completing Beast Tribe quests will reward you with EXP, guild tomes, and Beast Tribe currency. Beast Tribe currency can be used to purchase various items, including materials, dyes, glamours, minions, and mounts. You'll unlock more items as you rank up through the Beast Tribe reputation, so it's definitely worth doing for the EXP alone, but the rewards are good in their own right if you enjoy collecting cosmetic items. Let's move on to duty content, starting with the Duty Finder. The Duty Finder is 14's version of an instant group finder. Here you'll find various content you can queue up for, and the Duty Finder will automatically match you with 3 or 7 other people depending on the type of content. This content varies from dungeons, trials, raids, and alliance raids, so let's go over what content that is. Dungeons are your typical 4-player content, consisting of a tank, healer, and 2 DPS. You'll fight through multiple trash packs and usually 3 bosses. Loot can be acquired from bosses and scattered throughout the dungeon. Your first dungeon will be unlocked at level 15, and you'll unlock more as you progress the story and level up. The duty support system will also be presented to you upon unlocking your first dungeon. This is an alternative to playing with other people, as it will match you with NPCs instead. These NPCs are typically slower than the average player, but they can help with DPS queues being slow, or be used to get over tank or healer anxiety if that is something that concerns you. The duty support system is available to all MSQ related dungeons. While you're in an instance, you might notice the party member list. This shows you your party members, including yourself. This provides information such as their health, MP buffs, and debuffs, and an easy way to click on party members without having to click on their character model. Trials are usually 8-player duties, although there are some 4-player trials as well. 8-player duties consist of 2 tanks, 2 healers, and 4 DPS. Typically, they consist of 1 boss fight and are part of the MSQ or another part of another quest series. In endgame, trials serve as entry-level encounters, with the extreme difficulty offering high item level weapons and accessories, and cosmetics such as mounts and minions. Raids are always 8-player duties. Raids consist of 4 different duties, each with a boss fight. Raids offer gear rewards, with the Savage version offering dyeable gear and weapons with the highest item level of the patch they were introduced in. Alliance raids are 24-player raids consisting of 3 different parties. Each of these parties include 1 tank, 2 healers, and 5 DPS. These raids have 4 bosses in total, with a few trash packs in between. Alliance raids offer high item level left side gear rewards, which are usually dyeable. There's also guild hests, which you might be tempted to do if you're first trying the game, and maybe they're decent to do for the very first time, but after that they're pretty bad, so don't stress these too much. They're like little duties that will introduce you to basic mechanics. Maybe worth doing if you want to kind of get used to how the game feels, but overall they are definitely skippable if you don't care for that. And lastly, let's talk about PvP. PvP will unlock upon reaching level 30, visiting your Grand Company HQ, and accepting the quest A Pup no longer. This quest will guide you to Morenby Dry Docks. From there, you'll unlock the Wolf's Den, 14's PvP hub. In this zone, your actions will be swapped to PvP actions, located in your PvP profile, so familiarize yourself with these actions. You can duel other players in the dueling circle, or try them out on the dummies located here. From the Wolf's Den, you can accept quests here to unlock Frontlines, Rival Wings, and Crystalline Conflict. Frontlines is a massive scale mode consisting of 3 teams, each with 24 players battling for control of objectives to win the greatest number of points. Rival Wings is a MOBA-like game mode consisting of 2 teams with 24 players each, who must gather resources to use mechas, push lanes, destroy towers, and the first team to destroy the enemy's core wins the game, or the team that pushed the most or did the most damage to an enemy's core when the timer expires will win. Crystalline Conflict is the push the payload-esque style of game mode, consisting of 2 teams with 5 players each. The first team to push their crystal into the enemy base will win, or the team who has pushed the crystal the most when the timer expires. For completing matches, you'll get various rewards, including wolf marks, tomes, job experience, and series milestone experience. Wolf marks are a special PvP currency that can be traded in for unique rewards at the Wolf Mark vendor, which include cosmetic items such as mounts of minions and even glamours. The series milestone is 14's equivalent of a battle pass, which lasts an entire patch cycle. This includes rewards such as glamours, minions, mounts, and a special currency trophy crystal, which can be used to purchase unique rewards, which include yet again glamours, minions, mounts, and other cosmetic items. To top this all off, we have the duty roulette. These appear in the duty finder, reset on a daily basis, and are an excellent source of EXP and tomes. You'll unlock more roulettes through the course of just playing the game. Finally, we have the party finder, the counterpart to duty finder. The party finder allows you to search for specific parties with specific objectives and duties in mind. This tool is mainly used for endgame content like Extreme Trials and Savage and Ultimate Raids, but can be used for other means. Extreme Trials and Savage Raids can be accessed via the duty finder, but I highly suggest not doing that and just sticking to party finder for the higher tiered content. And finally, let's finish off with some miscellaneous content, which is still pretty important. So we'll begin with inns, which are unlocked at level 9 and contain a wide variety of features, including the Armoire, Retainer Bell, Crystal Bell, Glamour Dresser, Unending Journal, and Orchestrion. So let's go over those. The Crystal Bell allows you to recustomize most of your character features, but not all of them for 2k gil. Things like skin and eye color can only be changed through a Fantasia. To unlock the Crystal Bell first, you must have reached level 15, then head to Limsa Laminsa, locate this quest, and finish a series of quests, in turn unlocking the Crystal Bell. The Armorer allows you to store specific items from seasonal events, the cash shop, and pre-order items, which is going to save you a lot of room in the long run, so make sure you're storing these items. The Glamour Dresser allows you to store up to 800 items to be used as cosmetics. We call this the Glamour system. You can apply any item you store in the Glamour Dresser to your own gear to take the look of that item. You can also make up to 20 Glamour plates with items stored in your Glamour Dresser and Armorer. These are your outfits you can create and use at any sanctuary by simply applying the Glamour plate to your currently equipped gear. You can also just apply an item's look to another piece without having to use the Glamour Dresser by having the item in your inventory and using a Glamour Prism to apply the look. You can also use a Glamour Dispeller to get rid of an item's glamour look if you wish. Glamour Prisms can be brought from your Grand Company for GC seals, the Wolf's Den for wolf marks, Fate vendors for gemstones, bought on the market board, or be made by crafters. This is mostly the same for Glamour Dispellers, but you can also buy these from vendors for gil. To unlock the Glamour system, you must first reach level 15, then head to Vesper's Bay in Western Fanland. Here you can accept a quest that will unlock glamours and the dyeing system. Dyes can be bought from merchant, beast tribe, vendors, bought on the market board, acquired through ventures, crafted, and various other means. Not all gear is dyeable though, and 800 might sound like a lot, and 20 glamour plates might sound a lot, but trust me, you're probably gonna run out, so enjoy that. While on the topic of glamours, we have the Calamity Salvager. This NPC can be found in any major city and can restore lost items for a small gil fee. This includes quest items and the ability to swap event glamours to fit another gender. Handy when you lose these items or you're like me and don't want to carry around the many quest items you'll get throughout your adventure. So if I ever want to glamour an item I got from a quest, I'll just go to the Calamity Salvager and buy it for a small gil fee and then glamour it from there. This saves me a lot of room in the long run. You'll also find the delivery Moogle here, which will receive items from multiple sources, either the cash shop, pre-ordering the current expansion, upgrading your account to a collector's edition. You'll get a variety of items delivered to the Moogle, which then you can take from the Moogle. You can also send items back and forth between other players with the delivery Moogle, but this is mostly unnecessary when you can just trade items. Which leads me into trading. If you go up to a player, you can actually trade items with a player. You can trade up to 1 million gil and 5 items. Now, a lot of items are untradeable, but it's there. The Unending Journal allows you to rewatch cutscenes you've already experienced, and the Orchestrion allows you to play music from the game which you can collect via Orchestrion scrolls. These can be found throughout the game for doing various activities and be given out as rewards. You'll also find faded copies of Orchestrion rolls, and these can be restored as usable scrolls with crafting. In this next section, we'll cover some other miscellaneous content, including the Gold Saucer, Deep Dungeon, and Open World zones such as Eureka and Bosnia. I won't go too in-depth in these, but I want to just make sure you're aware of their existence. Maybe it's something that interests you in the future. The Gold Saucer can be unlocked at level 15 in the MSQ and then heading to Older. This quest will guide you to the Gold Saucer and unlock it with its plethora of minigames, including games such as Triple Triad, Chocobo Racing, and much more. Completing minigames in the Gold Saucer will reward MGP, which can be used at the MGP vendors for exclusive Gold Saucer rewards such as cosmetics and collectibles. This ranges from glamours, mounts, minions, emotes, music scrolls, Triple Triad cards. There's so much, okay? Anyway, moving on. There is currently 3 deep dungeons in FF14, with an extra one hopefully to come in Dawntra. Palace of the Dead, Heaven on High, and Eureka Orpheus. Deep Dungeon is a roguelike instance with its own progression system, items, and rules, comprising of multiple floors with every 10 floors serving as a single instance. Palace of the Dead caps at level 60 and can be unlocked as early as level 17, with later floors being accessible at level 50 and beyond, 200 floors in total. Heaven on High caps at level 70 and can be unlocked at level 61 with 100 floors in total. Eureka Orpheus caps at level 90 and can be unlocked at level 81. Just like Heaven on High, it has a total of 100 floors. Heaven on High and Eureka Orpheus can only be unlocked after completing the first 50 floors of Palace of the Dead. The rewards for this content are cosmetic and collectible items, including mounts, minions, glamours, experience, and more. The open world zones include Eureka and Bosnia, and they have their own progression system and rules. These are massive open world zones with an emphasis on combat and exploration while leveling your separate progression system. Eureka has an element mechanic to it where you can match an enemy's element to defend against it or swap to the element they are weak to exploit their weakness and deal more damage. Bosnia has a system similar to that of the current open world, with fates, but also includes unique systems like duels, which are single boss fights between one player and a boss, and then we also have large scale raids with up to 24 to 48 players. Both zones offer unique cosmetic rewards such as mounts, minions, glamours, EXP, and are even associated with relic weapons. Let's now go over some of the menu systems before moving on to the UI and HUD. Achievements are obtained for just playing the game and completing specific objectives like the MSQ, exploring zones, completing raids, and more. Achievements can provide unique cosmetic rewards, and you can also earn an achievement currency, which can be traded in at a vendor in Gridania for even more unique cosmetic rewards. New Game Plus is a way to re-experience any expansion or patches or MSQ. This allows you to replay duties which would be available only once to play. To unlock New Game Plus, head to Vesper's Bay in Western Farland and accept this quest, which in turn will unlock New Game Plus. If you're not skipping story, then I wouldn't really worry about this, but if you are skipping story and you regret it, then this is something to keep in mind. Currency menu. This is where all of your currency is. Who would have figured? Seriously though, it's a handy menu for keeping track of all your currencies. Let's quickly go over the character menu. Here we have our attribute tabs, which include our stats and gear. The profile tab, which includes titles, grand company information, your race, city state, name, day, and guardian. Titles are awarded from achievements and can be chosen and displayed here. The class and job tab, which is pretty self-explanatory, but includes all of your combat and non-combat classes and jobs, what level they are, and how much EXP they have until the next level. And finally, the reputation tab. This shows your player commendations and beast tribe reputation, progress, and ranks. Player commendations can be given at the end of duties to players that left a good impression on you or just have really good portraits. Next, let's go over some logs, starting with timers. This will show us timers ranging from daily beast tribe allowance to the status of your retain adventures. The log menu comprises a plethora of helpful logs. The hunting log, which we've been over in the leveling section. The sightseeing log, a collectible log for emoting at certain landmarks, can be unlocked at level 20 and accepting the quest A Sight to Behold in New Gridania. And then we have the crafting and gathering log. The crafting log contains all of your recipes, and the gathering log contains a list of every item you can gather within a location and checklist. The fishing log contains a list of every fish, and the fish guide contains a list of every fish you've caught. The orchestrion list contains all songs in the game, with collected ones being highlighted. The challenge log, which is the highlight of the logs, contains a weekly list of challenges which can be fulfilled, and progressing these will reward you with EXP and currencies such as gil. These challenges are well worth doing, especially as a new player. The challenge log can be unlocked at level 15 and accepting the quest Rising to the Challenge in Limsa Laminsa. I highly suggest doing this. Now let's go over some party options. Signs. These can be put on enemies, party members, and objects. They can help with attack order and likes, but can also be handy for mechanics. These are pretty niche, but they do see some use, especially in high-end content. Waymarks from A to D and 1 to 4. These can be placed on the ground and will stay up until they are either changed or reset and cannot be moved or changed during combat. Waymarks are a phenomenal tool. These can help with cardinal orientation and where to go for certain mechanics. They are highly valued in endgame encounters, but they don't see too much use when you're doing leveling dungeons and the likes. Ready check. It's good etiquette to use the ready check feature before pulling a boss in endgame encounters, or when someone has to AFK and maybe you don't realize they came back yet. This is a good way to check that. The countdown, which initiates a countdown from 5 to 30 seconds to indicate when the encounter is going to be pulled. Really important to use this during endgame encounters so everyone can prepare their openers, but again, not really too important in low-end content. Before we move on to the UI, let's go over some of the social aspects of this game, starting with emotes. If you played an MMO before, then you probably know what emotes are, but if not, these are just animations you can make your character do, ranging from character expressions to dances. These are almost purely a social aspect, but some quests will require you to spam an emote to complete some objectives. In the emote menu, it's also worth ticking this setting off to avoid spamming the chat log with all your emotes, especially if you're in a major city. The friend list. This includes every player you have added to your friend list. Good for keeping track of your friends. As creepy as that sounds. Onto adventure plates. These are simply customizable character profiles with plenty of features to customize. You can also unlock more themes for your adventure plate through the likes of doing PvP and other content. Viewable by other players and just a social and cosmetic feature that adds a lot of personality to your character, in my opinion. Next up, we have free companies, or FC. An FC is 14's equivalent of a guild. You can only belong to one FC on a given character. FCs can hold up to a total of 512 players, provides a social outlook, and FC buffs, but most importantly, FCs can acquire land and a house. Housing being a big one. There's also personal housing, but there's that. FC housing provides an assortment of benefits, including Chocobo stables, where you can train and color your Chocobo, FC crafting, providing unique crafting items and higher tier FC buffs, and FC ventures, which can provide unique rewards and items for FC crafting. It's worth belonging to an FC on 14 as the benefits are great and just having a social outlook is never a bad idea in an MMO. We then also have link shells. This includes normal and cross-world link shells. Link shells provide unique player chat channels, with normal link shells hosting 128 players while cross-world hosts up to 64. And how about the character configuration menu? This menu contains options that will directly affect your character. There are a ton of options here, and explaining them in detail could be its own video. I recommend looking through these options yourself, but the highlight here is movement settings, standard and legacy. Now this is down to personal preference, but I believe legacy is the way to go. It allows more freedom of movement over standard controls, but try the two movements out yourself and see which one you like more. The system menu. This menu contains all the options to optimize your game, display, sound, graphic settings, accessibility options, and even change your UI themes. Play around with these settings, find what options work best for your system and preferences. The user macro tab allows you to create up to 99 character macros and 99 shared macros that will be shared amongst all your characters. Macros allow you to execute multiple strings of commands with the touch of a single button, or give you the option to use an ability in a specific way, like mouse over macros. I won't worry about these too much when you're starting out, but they are valuable assets later on. A good rule of thumb when making macros is to never macro GCDs, but OGCDs are fair game. The reason for this is because macros in 14 have a delay, and if you delay that with GCDs, you're going to clip into the GCD, which can be a pretty significant damage loss if it consistently happens. options. That said, in endgame content, there are some people who will macro GCDs and they either know what they're doing or they don't know what they're doing. I won't worry about this too much when you're starting out, but when you really get into the nitty gritty of doing high-end content and optimizing your damage, it might be worth looking into. But for now, just follow this rule of thumb that I've given you. Keybinds, the buttons you press to use abilities on your hotbar or shortcuts to access different menus, etc. It's always a good idea to play around with keybinds, especially if you don't have an MMO mouse or aren't using a controller. You'll want to use keys like Q, E, R, and the likes for your hotbars. Finally, we have the user interface and HUD layout. This is a big one. The UI is all of this. Your HP, hotbars, minimap, gauges, buffs, debuffs, and it goes on. FF14's user interface is extremely customizable, being able to move pretty much any element you desire. Play around with this to get a feel for how exactly you want your UI to look. I recommend adding a third hotbar, as every job at least requires 3, and moving your buffs and debuffs to a more appropriate place, along with moving your target bar closer to your hotbar, along with the debuffs and cast bars, which you can separate and resize individually. That about covers everything you need to know when starting out in Final Fantasy XIV. If you have any other questions or think I forgot something, then do leave it in the comments below and I'll do my best to get back to them. Thanks a lot for watching. Make sure to check out my social links in the description below, especially my Twitch. I stream a lot, and if you do have any further questions, you can always come to my Twitch and ask me. I hope you enjoy your time in the Aussie as much as I have. Goodbye. Oh, and subscribe. See you in the next one.